Spark Kids, hey Sparky. Now Sparky, I'm not sure if I've ever told you, but when I was a little girl, I actually had a pet dog. Yeah, I don't know why you're so surprised, but it was called Joshua, like Joshua in this story. And Joshua was a really clever dog, and he could actually do a trick that was about what's happening in this story today. Sparky says, was Joshua cleverer than Sparky? Sparky. You got distracted by a fly. I think my dog Joshua wasn't quite as clever as you because he couldn't talk, but he also didn't really get distracted by flies, so Sparky. Anyway, let's watch the Spark Kids episode and then maybe I'll tell you about the trick my dog did. Okay, let's go. When Joshua was at Jericho, he lifted his eyes and looked, and suddenly a man was standing before him with a sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" The man said, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." Joshua fell with his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are is holy." And so Joshua did. All the people in Jericho were terrified and hiding inside the city. They weren't opening their doors, no one went out, and no one went in. God said to Joshua, "Look, I have given Jericho into your hand, even with its mighty king and men of valor." And then he gave Joshua a very strange and some very specific instructions on how they were going to take over the city. Joshua told everyone else what to do. They got ready, gathering everyone together and finding all the things that they needed. Joshua called out, saying, "Go forward, march round the city and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord." Just as Joshua had commanded the people, the armed men walked first. Then 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns went forward, blowing the trumpets. After them came the Ark of the Covenant, and then the rest of the people, with the trumpets blowing all the time. But apart from the trumpets, no one made a sound, because Joshua said, "No word shall go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout." And so the Ark of the Covenant circled the city once that day, and then they all went back to their camp and spent the night there. They rose early the next morning, and the priests took up the trumpets and the Ark of the Covenant again, and they walked around the city once, with the only sound being the blast of the trumpets. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they rose early at dawn, and all marched around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua called out and said, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city, and the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab and her family and her house shall live. Make sure you keep yourself safe, and don't take anything from the city, for it is meant to be destroyed." And so the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown, and the walls of the city fell down flat. The Israelites went up into the city and captured it, and started to destroy it. But the spies who Rahab had protected went to find her and her family, to keep them safe, and brought them back into the camp of Israel. When the city was destroyed, Joshua cursed it, saying, "Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho." Hi Spark Kids. If you were to think of a soldier or a warrior preparing to go into battle, what would you think of? Maybe some kind of protective things like armour, like a helmet and a shield or a uniform. Probably lots of training, getting ready, pow, 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 pow. Probably a weapon of some kind, a sword or a bow and arrow, pew, or a gun, pew, pew, pew. Probably not some trumpets in a big old box. But that that is what Joshua and the Israelites come into this battle with. They march around a city, not saying anything, playing the trumpet, and then on the last day they give a good shout. And the walls fall down. That is a very strange sort of battle plan. But of course, the Israelites had a secret weapon. They had the power of God, and that's what won the battle. But actually, when we look at the other bit of the story, it's not actually that way round, is it? See, this crazy angel commander guy that Joshua meets before the battle didn't say, I'm here, I'm right behind you, go into battle, I'll help you out. He said, I am fighting for God. Because the battle was God's battle, not Joshua's. See, Joshua didn't just jump into something and forge forward and do his own thing and trust that God had his back and would come through and sort everything out. Instead, he listened to God and did exactly what God said. And, the battle was won. God's people took over Jericho. The walls came tumbling down. And this story shows us that there is a different way to live and to push towards the things that God has called us to do. You see, in the world, when there's something we want to achieve, there's somewhere we want to go, there's something we want to start or build or whatever it is, it tells us just to work, keep going, make a plan. And none of those are bad things. It's good to work hard. It's good to have a plan. But actually, this story is telling us that instead of us pushing forward and just hoping and praying that God's going to jump on board with what we're doing, we actually listen to him and join in with his plans. Even when, like this one, they seem very, very strange. But as we live in obedience, instead of pushing our own agenda, as we listen to God and do what he tells us to do, we begin to see the power of God at work in our lives. It's a very different way to live than the rest of the world, and it's not always easy. It often means going against kind of the natural flow that the world has created for us. But it's incredible because it sees God come into our lives. It sees his purposes be fulfilled through us. And it sees him moving us into the places that he always created us to be in. Spark Kids, if this is a way you want to live, we're going to pray together in a few moments. If you want to not just do what everyone else is doing, what everyone in the world tells us to do, but you want to listen to God, follow his plan and his way, we're going to pray for that right now. Why don't you just close your eyes, put out your hands and repeat this prayer after me. Dear God, you made the walls of the city fall down with just a shout. You parted the waters for your people to cross. I want to see you move in my life. I will listen for you and do what you say. Amen. What an amazing prayer to pray. And that's a prayer that you can just keep praying because it's something we have to keep coming back to because the world around us tries to pull us into doing things its way when we want to listen to God and be in obedience. So why don't you this week take a moment, try and find a quiet space for a few minutes and listen to God and say, God, is there something you want me to do? Is there something I can do today? And see if any idea or word or picture pops into your head from God. And as we do that, we learn all the things that he has called us to do. Have fun, Spark Kids, and I'll see you next week. That is such a cool story, isn't it, Sparky? Oh, Sparky wants to know how my dog used to do the trick. Well, he was so cool, Sparky. First, you'd say round a round or something, and then he would chase his tail round 7 times in a circle. And then you'd say shout, and he would bark really, really loudly, like the Israelites blowing the trumpets. And then my dad would say, and the walls fall down. And then Joshua would roll on the floor. Sparky says he could do that. Well, maybe let's practice later. But it was so cool. And once my dad came and made my dog perform it at my school assembly, which was quite so cool to see my dog at school. Yeah, anyway, let's get on with it. You guys are making some really cool kazoos today, so you can make lots of noise like the Israelites did with their trumpets. Here's one for you to look at now. That's gonna be really fun, and we'll see you next week. Bye.